Welcome to the program, and first up, the compelling drama off the coast of Sumatra and in Jakarta over the 78 asylum seekers still on board an Australian ship 2 days after they were rescued at sea. The Australian government expects that Jakarta will accept the refugees who are on board the Oceanic Viking because they were picked up in Indonesia's search and rescue zone. It's bound to be a topic of discussion when Kevin Rudd meets the Indonesian president tonight, with the two already scheduled to discuss the rising tide of asylum seekers in the region. It's a problem the opposition is determined to exploit, as political editor Chris Uhlmann reports.
The Indonesian coast, an Australian ship is circling while it waits for permission from Jakarta to bring 78 asylum seekers ashore. In Parliament, there's a different kind of circle work.
We have a very tough policy, but it's also a humane and fair policy. It's important that we maintain a policy that is tough, but is also humane and fair. We have a very strong and tough approach when it comes to border protection, a policy that is tough, but humane and fair.
But everything does eventually end. Border protection boats intercepted the asylum seekers off the coast of Sumatra on the weekend in a part of the ocean where Indonesia is deemed responsible for search and rescue. Help came because, remarkably, a distress call had gone out from a mobile phone aboard the asylum seekers' boat to the Australian Maritime Safety Authority's international hotline.
The HMAS Armidale made contact with the vessel, and to ensure the safety of the passengers, the people have been taken off the vessel and are on board the Oceanic Viking. Initial indications are that there are 78 passengers on board the vessel in distress, including 5 women and 5 young children. The passengers are safe and have no major medical problems. One passenger has a fever and her condition is being monitored.
International law expert Professor Don Rothwell says the law is clear on which state is responsible for the asylum seekers.
That rescue was one that was coordinated by Indonesian search and rescue authorities. It took place within the Indonesian search and rescue zone, within the Indonesian exclusive economic zone. International law makes it fairly clear that whilst Australia had the first responsibility to respond and deal with that incident in cooperation with the Indonesians, Indonesia really has the primary responsibility for receiving and landing these people once they've been rescued, given that Indonesia is the nearest port and that Indonesia has coordinated the search and rescue effort.
But 2 days after the rescue, Australia's still waiting for Indonesia to give the Ocean Viking permission to land.
Can the Acting Prime Minister explain to the House why this has not already happened?
We are consulting with the Indonesian Search and Rescue Authority about options for bringing the rescued people to a safe place. In doing so, we will follow the letter of the law in relation to this matter.
It's possible that things might not go to plan.
Indonesia, much like Australia in 2001, might seek to say, well, look, we're not prepared to take these people, in which case the onus would inevitably then have to fall back upon Australia as the country which has effected the rescue and which is at least geographically within the region within which the rescue took place. Australia is, of course, also a party to the Refugee Convention, and if these people are seeking to make asylum claims, Australia is well placed to assess those claims and process them. But it's important to note that the primary responsibility really does rest with Indonesia, and I think that everything that the government's been saying on that matter makes it clear that that's the way that the Australian government views it also.
The Prime Minister is in Indonesia for the presidential inauguration, and the two are expected to talk about greater cooperation on dealing with the rising tide of asylum seekers.
Will a decision be made on this, do you think, before the Prime Minister meets with his Indonesian counterpart later today?
Look, this will be something that will be resolved between the agencies of both countries. The priority here is to make sure that those passengers are safe and that we do everything that is proper, but I cannot confirm whether that will be before or after the President and the Prime Minister meet.
The Immigration Department already spends between $16 and $20 million a year supporting its Indonesian counterpart, and Australian money has helped to build a detention centre in Sumatra. The Australian Federal Police, the Australian Secret Intelligence Service and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade combined to gather intelligence on people smuggling networks.
Intelligence is a quite imprecise science, and while we certainly do have good information quite often about planned voyages and possible voyages and actual departures, that's not to say that we would ever believe that we knew everything that was happening in foreign parts of the world, but frankly we receive a good service from the intelligence community.
Intelligence agencies also combine with the Indonesians to disrupt people smuggler networks, and part of that involves payments to the local police. In 2002, the program bothered Senator John Faulkner enough to write his own addendum to a report on the sinking of an asylum seeker's boat. He detailed questions he believed the government should answer, including what disruption activities are acceptable, who carries them out, who pays for them, what accountability and control mechanisms are in place, who authorises these activities, what is the effect of these activities, what, if any, consideration is given to questions of safety of the lives at sea. The ABC put those questions to the Prime Minister's office last week, and the response began, "The government does not comment on specific arrangements regarding law enforcement operational matters." The opposition sees a huge opportunity in the government's recent border tribulations.
When we abolished the Pacific Solution, you provided no opposition
Minister,
to that.
we are not here to discuss the coalition's policy.
No, we're not.
We are not, Minister.
You want to discuss
We
policy.
are here to discuss what you are going to do to solve the problem.
All right,
Don't keep going back and saying...
You may not like to, dear Senator, but you've had your go and I'm going to give you the answer, right? The answer is we abolished the Pacific Solution. I'm absolutely proud of that. It was a blight on Australia and a blight on our international reputation.
The government has tempered its language since last week, when the Prime Minister was determined to show a hard face to his domestic political audience.
I make absolutely no apology whatsoever for taking a hard line on illegal immigration to Australia.
That tone disturbed some of his strongest supporters, including the former Labor Party Secretary, Tim Gartrell.
I think he got the balance right on Friday. I think earlier in the week his language was probably a bit too far on the tough side.
And in a rare break in the Parliamentary Labor Party's ranks, Victorian MP Michael Danby has criticised the Prime Minister's choice of words.
I like the tone of Immigration Minister Chris Evans and the Home Affairs Minister Brendan O'Connor, which is sort of balanced and non-hysterical. I don't like expressions like illegal immigration.
By any rational measure, the flood of people pouring out of Afghanistan and Sri Lanka clearly isn't driven by tinkering with Australia's border protection regime. But one thing is even clearer. This debate isn't driven by reason.
Political editor Chris Uhlmann.